The fourth China Central and Eastern European Countries Expo has just kicked off in Ningbo,
China's
Zhejiang
trade with
province.
Central and Eastern European countries rose by over 6% from a year ago to a record of more than $142 billion.
The China Central and Eastern European Consumer Goods Fair is underway in eastern China. The fourth edition of the event has drawn businesses from 9 additional countries outside the region, including the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, with many attending for the very first time. Amid shockwaves from US tariffs disrupting global trade, could this signal an effort by China and the European nations to forge new partnerships and sustain economic growth? In this episode of Deep Dive, my colleague Tianlu joins me from the Expo with her first-hand observations. It's Saturday, May 24th. So, Tianlu, how would you describe the overall atmosphere at this year's Expo? I mean, have any exhibitors expressed optimism with the recent easing in global trade tensions?
Well, the atmosphere at this year's China CEEC Expo was energetic, optimistic, and more international than ever. You could feel that people were excited about reconnect, not just to do business, but to re-establish trust and partnerships after a few uncertain years globally and also amid the global trade tensions. And one key change I noticed was that the expo is no longer just focused on the Central and Eastern European countries. This year, we saw active participation from Germany, France, Italy, and even the UK. So the event is evolving into a broader CEEC Plus platform, and that expansion really brought a stronger European presence. And in terms of mood, most exhibitors I talked to were quite hopeful and optimistic about trade and cooperation in the future. And yes, everyone is aware of global trade tensions like the tariff policies, especially with the US. But there's still a clear brief that the Chinese market is too big and too important to ignore. And that's why many companies came to Ningbo to explore long-term cooperation, not just short-term sales.
Right, so sounds like a big trend at the fourth edition of the Expo is that there are countries or Western European countries also taking part in this expo that was designed for Central and Eastern European countries. And on top of this new trend, have any other exhibitors adapted or upgraded their displays or strategies at the expo because of the global tariff pressures?
I think many exhibitors said they are no longer selling products. They are trying to build brands in China, explore licensing deals, and find joint R&D opportunities. And one of the clearest trends this year was the shift toward innovation and tech-driven displays. Because in previous expos, you'd see a lot of traditional CEE products, wine, cheese, skincare, that sort of thing. And those are still there, of course, but this year they were accompanied by things like VR headsets, robotics, green energy solutions, and even lightweight electric aircraft. And I think this is partly a response to the global tariff environment. Instead of relying on just volume exports, they are trying to explore more sustainable, higher value strategies. And the message from exhibitors were very clear. They said they are not here just to sell, they are here to stay, to adapt, and to grow with the Chinese market.
So this expo comes at the time when there's a lot of tension, chaos, turbulence in the global trade order. And in your conversations with exhibitors, how frequently has the keyword trade war come up? And what are the top challenges that the businesses are facing?
Well, the top trade tensions, especially the US-China tariffs, came up in almost every high-level conversation, and also comes up in almost every interview I had. For instance, in my interview with the German Chamber of Commerce in East China, They told me that nearly 90% of their member companies in China have felt the impact of the latest tariffs, and that's a huge number. And the biggest challenge mentioned by all my interviewees, like from Germany, Serbia, and Slovenia, was the uncertainty. It's not just about cost increases or paperwork, it's about not knowing what comes next. If you're trying to plan a 5-year investment strategy, but trade policies might change in 3 months, and it's incredibly difficult to move forward with confidence. So, businesses also talked about rising logistics costs, more complex compliance requirements, and also the delays in supply chains. And even companies that are not directly affected by the tariffs are still impacted through raw material shortages and shifting customer demand and also the overall risk.
I'm just wondering, are there industries that are taking a bigger hit from the trade disruption and hence become more vocal about these issues? And how are they dealing with this situation?
Yeah. Particularly those tied to global supply chains like automotive, electronics, machinery, and even food processing. And these sectors rely heavily on predictability, and when that disappears, it hits them hard. And the Slovenian official I spoke to, Mr. Matej Skocier, pointed out that Slovenia's economy is incredibly export dependent. Over 85% of its GDP is tied to exports. So any disruption in global trade flows, even indirect ones, creates pressure on their companies. So to deal with this, many businesses are trying to diversify, not just in where they source materials, but also how they sell. And some are looking into setting up operations inside China or using expos like this one to build more localized supply relationships. And there's also a push from officials to encourage stronger institutional dialogue to help companies navigate the changes more effectively.
And are multinationals and smaller businesses responding differently to the tariff pressures?
Yeah, there's a notable difference. Larger multinationals usually have more options. They can move production to third countries, open R&D centers in China, or simply just absorb the extra cost for a while. And their global networks give them more flexibility. But smaller businesses, especially from some small countries, they don't have that luxury. Many of them are first-time entrants to the Chinese market, and they rely heavily on platforms like the China CEEC Expo to gain visibility and secure distribution deals. So I remember in an interview with the Serbian chamber, they told me that they emphasized how the China-Serbia free trade agreement has helped their SMEs. It doesn't just cut tariffs, it also builds trust, encourages long-term relationships, and gives these companies a chance to compete fairly in a big market like China.
So countries from Central and Eastern Europe are not the biggest, the largest economies in the world, but they certainly have their position in this trade order. So how do these countries fit into the broader trade landscape, especially amid trade tensions?
Well, I think they play a very unique role. Most CEE countries are not directly involved in tariff conflicts, but they are deeply connected to the global economy through EU supply chains. So
Right.
they feel the ripple effects when something big happens, like the US-China tariffs and or the new EU regulatory shifts. But at the same time, they see themselves as practical, open, and cooperative partners. For instance, Serbia doesn't have the baggage of major power politics, so it's been able to position itself as a bridge between East and West. And what's interesting is that many of these countries are now focusing not just on exporting goods, but also on attracting Chinese investment in energy, infrastructure, and green industries.
Okay, so now let's forget about trade war for a second. And before the recent tariff spikes, how was trade and investment evolving between China and Central and Eastern Europe?
Well, I think before the latest tensions, like you mentioned, the trade between China and Central and Eastern Europe was growing steadily because the Serbian chamber reported a 30% increase in bilateral trade with China just 1 year after their FTA was signed and implemented. And that's a strong number. And in other countries too, you could see more Chinese investment coming in, whether it's in highway projects, railways, agriculture, or logistics hubs. And meanwhile, CEE countries were increasing exports of food, wine, machinery, and even some clean tech into the Chinese market. And I remember the Slovenian official also mentioned about their skis and also some high-tech cooperation. So the momentum was already there, and what changed now is the global context and also the need to make that cooperation more resilient and rule-based.
And now with the trade frictions and tariffs, are these pushing China and Central and Eastern European countries closer economically?
I believe it has, at least in terms of mindset and strategic planning. When other trade relationships become more difficult or politicized, countries tend to look for more reliable and predictable partners like Chinese market. And in this case, China and many CEE countries have found common ground in promoting open markets and long-term industrial cooperation. And I've heard this from both sides. Officials want to focus on infrastructure, technology, exchange, and even the digital connectivity. So yes, the global tensions might have slowed some things down, but they've also made others more focused. And so I think the tariff conflict pushed China and the CE countries closer economically.
So this expo in Ningbo has come at a very special timing. And how will the fourth edition of this expo help maintain the momentum in trade and economic ties between China and Europe under the current circumstances?
I think this year's expo sent a strong message that even in uncertain times, dialogue and cooperation are still possible and, in fact, more necessary than ever. The Serbian chamber told me that the fourth China CEC Expo has indeed evolved over the years and becoming increasingly relevant and useful for Serbian enterprises. It is an important platform for Serbian business to directly engage with Chinese market, and it plays such an important role to enhance visibility of our products. Of the both like the Chinese products and also the products from other countries in this market and foster synergies for broader cooperation. So it's a vital platform for EU companies to collaborate with Chinese companies. And as digitalization and technological innovation become more central to the global economy, the China CEC Expo has adapted to these trends by focusing this year also on cutting-edge industries such as AI, low-altitude economy, and innovation. And the Expo has evolved into a more comprehensive platform for investment opportunities as well, not just trade. It serves as a safe environment to form lasting partnerships, especially as companies seek to diversify their supply chains. So, in today's era of uncertainty, China's consistent trade policies and strategic initiatives, such as this one, offer a stable environment for global trade, and also China's established infrastructure and manufacturing capabilities provide reliability in global supply chains, and which are a critical factor for businesses worldwide. And more than just business deals, it's about maintaining relationships, Many officials said the forums, face-to-face meetings, and cultural exchanges all help rebuild trust. And when so much of the global conversation is about decoupling or something like the tariff conflicts, and events like this one in Ningbo remind us that integration and cooperation are still happening and still matter.
So when pessimism is growing in the global trade order, China has really become that stabilizing factor. Thank you very much for your time, Tianlu.
And thank you.
This week, the European Union vowed to defend its interests after US President Donald Trump threatened to impose 50% tariffs on all EU goods entering the US as early as next weekend. Just weeks after Trump temporarily eased global trade tensions, a new wave of uncertainty may be on the horizon. That brings us to the end of this episode of Deep Dive. If you enjoyed what you just heard, don't forget to follow us on your podcast platforms. Just search for Deep Dive. You can also leave a comment to let us know what you want to learn about China and beyond. This episode is brought to you by me, Li Yunqi, and my colleagues Zhang Zhang and Qi Zhi. Special thanks to CGTN Radio reporter Tianlu. I'll see you in the next one.